Everyone. I saw this tweet and I thought it was interesting anyway. The United Nations could run out of money in a few weeks, the Secretary General warns. And here's the CBS article. And the United Nations is fundamentally a taxpayer-funded entity, and it doesn't have resources that it can back up any debts that it owes, right? Like it doesn't, it's not a country, it's not in control of a country, it's a United Nations effort, right? And so, well, I think that it's interesting that they get to run a deficit. If you run a business, you don't get to just run a deficit. I mean, like, you can have a cash flow and you can have credit and all that other stuff, but there are rules around that, and you can't just, well, run $230 million deficit and expect that that's okay, and expect to run a normal operations when things aren't okay, right? Like, you have to respond to what the market's doing. You have to respond to the reality of the world that you live in. So I think it's weird that all this kind of stacks up. So here's the CBS News article. United Nations could run out of money in a few weeks, Secretary General warns. The United Nations is running a deficit of $230 million. Secretary General Antonio Guterres, said on Monday, and may run out of money by the end of October. In a letter intended for the 37,000 employees at the UN Secretariat and obtained by CBS News' Pamela Falk, Gutierrez says unspecified, quote, additional stopgap measures would have to be taken to ensure salaries and entitlements are paid. Membership states have paid only 70% of the total amount needed for our regular budget operations in 2019. This translates into a cash shortage of $230 million at the end of September. We run the risk of depleting our backup liquidity reserves by the end of the month, he wrote. To cut costs, Gutierrez mentioned postponing conferences and meetings and reducing services while also restricting office travel to only essential activities and taking measures to save energy. Now, isn't the UN pushing for a climate emergency? Shouldn't they be taking measures to save energy anyway? And shouldn't office travel be essential anyway? Isn't that what an emergency is? No? Weird. Back to the article. Although 129 states out of 193 have now paid their regular annual dues, the most recent being Syria, UN spokesperson Stephanie Dujarric told correspondents at the regular briefing in New York that others needed to pay, quote, urgently and in full. Quote, this is the only way to avoid a default that could risk disrupting operations globally. The Secretary General further asked governments to address the underlying reasons for the crisis and agree on measures to put the United Nations on sound financial footing. Gutierrez has asked member states earlier this year to up contributions to the world body to head off cash flow problems, but they refused, a UN official told French news agency AFP on condition of anonymity. Quote, the ultimate responsibility for our financial health lies with member states, Gutierrez says. And I guess there's not too much left. Okay. Not including what it pays for peacekeeping operations, the UN's operating budget for 2018-19 is close to $5.4 billion, with the United States contributing the largest share at 22%. That's a lot of money. As the Council on Foreign Relations explained earlier this year, U.S. contributions are vital to the UN's operation, and cuts to the discretionary contributions implemented by Mr. Trump's administration have already forced the UN agency that serves Palestinian refugees to make deep cuts. While the White House has been pushing for a broad reassessment of the U.S. contribution to the UN budget since Mr. Trump took office. So, again, I find it interesting. All of this stuff stacking up. And, well, I mean, fundamentally, the United Nations has a responsibility to the member states to live within its means and do with the dues and with the money that it can within its means. You can't run a deficit. It doesn't work that way, because then the whole system breaks down and then there's nothing that gets done. Nothing at all, right? So you can't bankrupt yourself. You can't bankrupt yourself to extend services further than you can afford. That's just math. That's just the reality of the world that we live in. Back to these articles. I found these two tweets very interesting. So here is Suresh Das, and they're tweeting, quote, this is heartbreaking and upsetting. Sufis on Queen West is closing. And here is the letter. It says, permanently closed. As a result of numerous hate messages and death threats we've received over the past week, we've decided to permanently close our shop. Our decision is made with a heavy heart in an effort to maintain our family and staff safety. We would like to thank our lovely customers and Queen Street neighbors for their wonderful support over the past 2 years. We would also like to extend our love and appreciation to our wonderful staff, who have invariably embodied the hard work, dedication, passion, and graciousness of Syrian newcomers. Since we opened up Sufis in 2017, we have been met with nothing but curiosity, respect, acceptance, and love from the people of Toronto, and for that we are eternally grateful. We will cherish the countless memories of us sharing stories, food, music, and laughter. With love, the Al-Sufi family. And Andrew Scheer is reacting to this, and he says, "This is sad news. Threats of violence and intimidation are absolutely unacceptable in Canada." And it's oddly similar to Justin Trudeau's reaction, which is, "Hatred and threats of violence have no place in Canada. We're always stronger together than when we're divided." I think it's interesting that neither mentioned that their son joined Antifa in shouting down an old lady with a walker and preventing her from entering a political rally. I mean, that's important. And I'm not saying that the restaurant should be closed. Obviously not. And the family shouldn't be held accountable for their son's actions. Obviously not. But, I mean, this is odd to leave out of the story because it is a part of the story, right? I mean, when the divisive rhetoric and the obvious concerns that that's causing within our country are so clear, and the tone deafness with which both prime ministerial candidates are showing is just strange. And again, ignoring a really big part of the story. It's not acceptable. Here is that same prime ministerial candidate, Justin Trudeau, talking to young children about when he decided to go in blackface. And I'm sorry that this is Twitter. Sometimes they're loud, sometimes they're quiet. This is the best I could do with this one, so it's not too long. We're going to watch all of it. Here we go. There are a lot of people who said they thought this was a parody at first, like it was a Sesame Street segment or something to that effect. A lot of people are saying cringeworthy, like there's a lot of speculation online here. And well, I mean, here we go.
And so Laura, do you want to stand up and ask a question?
Why did you paint your face brown?
Ooh, it was something I shouldn't have done because it hurt people. It's not something that you should do, and that is something that I learned. I didn't know it back then, but I know it now, and I'm sorry I hurt people.
But did you paint your nose and your hands brown?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was the wrong thing to do.
And so
I don't know that this helps him. I mean, I don't know that this helps him, really. It's a strange thing to put out there. The whole thing is very cringy, very strange, weird. Here's Justin Trudeau right after the Jody Wilson-Raybould SNC-Lavalin scandal broke in the Globe and Mail, and he said that the story in the Globe is false.
Did you or anyone in your office pressure the former Attorney General to abandon the prosecution of SNC-Lavalin?
The allegations in the Globe story this morning are false. Neither the current nor the previous Attorney General was ever directed by me or by anyone in my office to take a decision in this matter.
So I'll leave it there. The link is in the description. This is a hard clip to find, believe it or not. And during the debate, Mr. Scheer and Mr. Trudeau got into a tussle about the same thing, and Justin Trudeau again doubled down on I didn't do anything wrong. And how can you take responsibility? Because how could you do something, or how could you take responsibility for something that you don't believe you did anything wrong with? And Justin Trudeau is claiming that this is a jobs thing, whereas the Jody Wilson-Raybould has illustrated sustained pressure on the Attorney General's office while she was Attorney General in order to give SNC a DPA, Deferred Prosecution Agreement. And then when she wouldn't, she was removed. And then Mr. Dion, who investigated the ethics and came to the conclusion that Mr. Trudeau did indeed violate the ethics for that, did indeed pressure the Attorney General. Well, Justin Trudeau is still not taking ownership for the fact that 2 cabinet ministers and another caucus member were discharged not only from cabinet, but also from caucus. And they weren't asked to return when they were found to be correct. The ethics commissioner said, yes, Mr. Trudeau broke the law. He shouldn't have done that. And even now, up to the debate, and this is a question after the debate, and I'm not sure if this is too quiet. I went and found the YouTube video, but links in the description. If it is, I apologize. It's all the way up. But he says, again, I was defending jobs. Fundamentally, defending jobs doesn't mean you get to break the law. It doesn't mean you get to obstruct justice. It doesn't mean you get to intervene with an attorney general who has her own mind and had made up her mind in September, right? You can't pressure her in October and November and then remove her in January for not playing ball the way you want. Or can you? Perhaps you can, because all of that happened. All of it did. And Mr. Trudeau stands still interviewing for the job of Prime Minister. So here he is, explaining more about what he meant during the debate for those allegations are false.
Last night on stage, you said that the allegations the Globe and Mail had published about the SNC Lavalin affair were false. Yet, after Mario Dionne's report came out, you said you take responsibility. So how do you take responsibility for something that you say didn't happen? I say is false.
I accepted Mr. Dionne's report, but I also disagreed with his conclusions. I don't think it is. I think it is important, and indeed the job of a prime minister, to stand up for people's jobs, to defend Canadians, to defend the public interest. I don't think any Canadian prime minister can ever set aside the need to stand up for the public interest, and that's exactly what I did.
So what are you saying is false with the allegations?
I was actually saying that Mr. Scheer was mischaracterizing the situation.
Mr. Trudeau, Christiana Maya,
So,
television. You might.
There we go. So, I mean, that's the explanation. Take it for what it is, but remember that Justin Trudeau had no problem looking into the camera and saying those allegations are false the first time, and didn't want to elaborate on the context. Like, yeah, we put pressure on her, but it's very interesting, this whole thing. And, well, I mean, less than 2 weeks to election. It is a wild and crazy ride. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to vote on October 21st, and have a wonderful, wonderful